Hello and welcome back to Disney Journey. I'm retired Imagineer Jim Shull, and it's hard to believe that almost 70 years ago, Disneyland in Anaheim opened to guests. Now, people had never seen anything like a Disneyland. They had state fairs and trolley parks, but they never had a park that was all based around storytelling. And therefore, the Disney company had as a task to explain what it was.
Among the challenges that Walt Disney faced in selling Disneyland was its location. It was going to be located in Anaheim, California, which Southern Californians knew as farmland, a location and a region that people drove through as quickly as they could on the way to San Diego or Long Beach. But they didn't linger, because why should they? Except now in 1955, this city was going to have a castle. And to explain that, well, Walt Disney had to reach into his tool chest to pull all the tools he had to explain his new idea. Walt and his team of Imagineers developed the plans and ideas for Disneyland, which was going to consist of a theme park and eventually a hotel. Now, many plans were developed, but not every plan was built. But the plans that were built included the castle and an enormous and very special parking lot. Now, Walt was proud of his park, and he'd clean up the trash whenever he could. And, well, we don't talk about the smoking Walt, but he did exist. The Disney company made a deal with American Broadcasting Company, which was a new network at the time and the smallest of the three. They were very eager to accept a Disneyland TV show, which would be on their network every week in exchange for some capital that would be used to build Disneyland there in Anaheim. And it also was good for the network, but it was especially good for Walt because he could explain the ideas, which again were new ideas. No one had seen these before. And so his Disneyland, well, it was sold. It was sold to people. And so families would get in the car and make the road trip down to Anaheim. Along the way, they would see some soon to be familiar objects, like this billboard.
Every time my family drove down to Anaheim, we had a standing pool where one of us got rich. Whoever saw the Matterhorn first got a whole 10 cents, which in 1960s was rich. The logo there on the billboard was, well, pretty crude by our standards today. But remember, back then, Disneyland was all about getting open. And that logo was hand drawn. Now, it would be refined over the decades until it became the corporate logo for the park that we know today.
At the gate, families would buy ticket books. And if they needed more information, well, they often would pick up a copy of the Disneyland News. Now, the Disneyland News premiered with the park, and it constantly reinforced information and ideas about the park, how to use it, what to do there, why they should plan another trip. And it had a unique position within the park because it was the springboard for Marty Sklar. Now, Marty, who headed creative at Disney Imagineering, went on to have an illustrious career of over 50 years. I prize my collection of cards from Marty Sklar telling me what a good job I did or where I need to improve. My family was one of those who entered Disneyland when it opened, and we spent many, many, many years there. Now, I was fortunate, more fortunate than many, because, well, my father was a photographer. He had his own studio and his own equipment. He had lab beakers and chemicals, and he pursued his profession for many decades. Now, these images, which were slides, are from his collection that he gifted to me, and they document Disneyland in its early years. It's a precious gift, so thanks, Dad. The lesson I learned as an Imagineer is that guests have to be taught the simple things, like how to get to Disneyland, what road to take, how long should they plan their trip, is there any place to eat along the way, how much gas will it take? And they also have to be given a reason to come. And often newspapers were the way to tell them, or using billboards, either in the park or on the road coming to the park. Now, this is my artwork, but you get the idea. Some of the billboards are really the only memory we have of the ride. And other billboards, well, it seems like there's a lot coming, so I better plan my next trip. Now, some of the billboards, well, they smell like they were staged, but these were simpler times. And having a billboard in the middle of Frontierland is kind of an odd thing, but again, simpler times. Or this one I love because I worked on it, Mickey's Toontown and Fantasmic. There are exceptions to every rule, and this is a rule that needs to be broken. This billboard needs to go. I meant it when I said that Walt reached into his toolbox to promote and sell Disneyland, and I meant it. He turned to the sponsors and the participants wherever possible to have them promote his new park. And they were effective, although some of them, well, unique isn't a strong enough word. I mean, the last time I rode the Jungle Cruise, I don't recall seeing TVs there, especially in the native village area, although it probably has good sound. I do like that cabinet. Looks like maple, maybe cherry wood. Some of the sponsorship connections are tenuous at best. In the case of Delta, it did make sense, however. But to this day, I still want to know, what was the flight attendant serving Mickey Mouse? And did anyone else say in the plane, I'll have what the mouse is having? Day to day, month to month, year to year, the communication was mainly through media, print media, the type you'd find in newspapers. And they had specialized campaigns, like the date night campaign, to make people realize, oh, I can come to Disneyland and be there at night. And it was a big deal. You know, go and take your date to Disneyland, get in the teacups, take a spin. Good times. But it was all about a full day at the park, except for the days the park was closed. But when it was open, it was always, well, friendable and funnable. I think they should bring this word back. Disneyland is funnable. The marketing and selling of Disney World was easier because, well, there was Disneyland. And even though Disney World was bigger, it essentially was the same playbook.
When Tokyo Disneyland opened, it only had to deal with two languages, English and Japanese. But when Euro Disneyland opened, it was a different beast because there 6 languages were used. And that made storytelling, script writing, and graphics an art unto themselves.
Tokyo Disneyland featured a lot of print media, and that was great. Remember, this was the day before social media. If you want to know something, you found out about it by reading paper, or going to a preview center, or looking at a magazine. All of these were important tools to communicate a Disneyland, what it was, why people need to go to it, why they should care. Your Disneyland had a lot of great publicity and a lot of great media. When it opened in 1992, it was a beachhead for Disney in the continent. Now, I could argue that they got there a decade too late, but they got there. Of course, Euro Disneyland does not exist. The resort and the park are now Disneyland, Disneyland Paris. And that makes this paper so much more valuable. What's interesting again is looking at the languages. There were a lot of them. In the case of Hong Kong Disneyland, there weren't 6 languages. There were just 3. The same goes for Shanghai Disneyland. We just had the 3. although English was always, you could get by with English. Among the Disney castle parks, Shanghai Disneyland is a beast to itself. It's inspired by Anaheim, but it really doesn't follow Anaheim or any of the other castle parks, which isn't to say it isn't fun. It's just different. Disneyland in Anaheim continued to grow, develop, and expand after the park opened in '55. And Disney turned to ads again, mostly ads in newspapers, although there'd be pamphlets and brochures and handouts, and they'd focus on how people could be informed about the new attraction or ride or entertainment that was opening at the park, even food. In every case, though, in the world, if you were smart and were given one of these brochures or ads, you'd clip them and put them in a book, because after all, someday, 70 years later, they'd be valuable. Disneyland, well, we know what it is now. We don't know why we know, but for generations, we've been indoctrinated and trained. We know how to use this park. And when the park was rolled out worldwide, well, people know what to do because, what happened in Anaheim tells them. Disneyland, the original in Anaheim, then is our North Star, which isn't the same thing as saying everything that the company did succeeded. Putting out a diagram of the park is not good communication. Putting a poster of a Fantasyland attraction in Tomorrowland is not good communication. But replacing those with fun maps, well, that really was good communication. And maybe, use other tools like, maybe chalkboard is the appropriate way. I remember going on my way out of the park each and every time to make a stop at the Disneyland News, where I'd buy brochures and books that I'd keep and treasure and add to my collection, that I'd look at, even today. And I still find them. I still have boxes of books that I'm uncovering. But occasionally I come across something like this. And this treasure reminds me, hey, it's time to go to Disneyland.
And with that, I bring this episode of Disney Journey to a close. If you haven't already, I invite you to subscribe, like, and hit the bell notification button so you'll know when the next episode is released. Until then, though, it's goodbye from Lost Canyon.